This particular slide is a review that you need to pay attention to because your FAA exam is only 5 weeks away. No, you don't have to take it. It's a final exam in this course. If you don't want to take it, that's up to you. I can't make you pass this course any more than I can make you wake up in the middle of class.
So if I pass it, I have a class.
Yeah, if you don't pass this course, you get an F in the course, and that goes on your grade, both for your college grade as well as your high school grade. However, you're taking 2 courses right now, most of you, and you took a course to begin the semester. Those are 3 courses, and they will all be added together for your final score. Okay. So pay attention up here. These are the number of questions that are likely to be asked in some random form from the sections that we've covered so far and that we'll continue to cover between now and the end of the semester. Right now, we're a little bit ahead of where we thought we would be, and that's good because that's going to give us more time to do some practice tests in the last week and a half or 2 weeks of the course. We'll be doing nothing but taking the same kind of tests that you've been taking up till now, but they will be 60 questions, and they will be randomly selected because I don't do it. I'm going to be letting the computer company determine what random questions, just like the FAA, they determine random questions. So you can see that operations is by far the bulk of the questions for the test. Weather and loading and performance are not significant because the only thing you really need to know about weather is the wind, clouds, and visibility, right? Those 3 factors. You really need to know about those 3 factors, and I've already given you basic information on how to get that data so that you can determine whether you're going to fly or not. Loading and performance is pretty easy too, isn't it? That's the reason it's the smallest category of questions on the final exam. And that's simply because, generally speaking, if you have a video camera or a still camera loaded on the bottom of your drone, that's about it as far as loading is concerned. And if you stay within the weight limits and the weight and the center of gravity limits, then your performance is exactly what the manufacturer tells you it's going to be. There's a performance in terms of endurance, battery endurance, performs in terms of climb rate, right? That sort of thing. So you need to pay attention that these are the question categories. I showed you this before. We had it in a nicer table form, a blue ink table form. But here it is again, because I want you to remember that what's coming up now, the operations that we're going to be talking about now, are going to comprise a significant portion, nearly 33% of the entire test. So we're talking about operations procedures. Some of them are pretty simple and basic, but you just need to remember them, and you need to absorb them from the standpoint of you as pilot in command are going to be responsible for the operations of the drone, and some of them will be basic enough so that you don't have to worry about trying to memorize a long set of procedures. The kinds of questions that you're going to get on the exam, as you will see, are questions that have to do with your basic understanding of your responsibility as pilot in command. And if you understand what your responsibilities are as pilot in command, you ought to be able to answer the majority of questions. 70% is a passing grade, but what I want to see from all of you is at least an 85% score on the practice exams that we'll continue to give you. It would delightfully surprise me if you were able to get 85% on the first practice exam that I give. I doubt it, but maybe that will be the case. I'd be hopeful. But each time you take one of these tests, you're going to get more and more familiar with the answers as well as the way in which the question was formulated. And that's just as important as thinking that you memorize the answers. Okay, so we're talking about carried objects. And all you really need to know about a carried object is that it is attached firmly and that it's in the center of gravity. And however that question is formulated on the exam, it's going to boil down to exactly those two things: securely fastened and within the center of gravity. One other factor that will come in later has to do with what? Does anybody pick up on what's missing from this, which we'll cover later? If it's securely fastened and it's in the center of gravity, there's only one more item that it has to meet: the weight. Exactly, the weight. So we're going to cover that in when we talked about loading. But the three factors are securely fastened, center of gravity, and doesn't exceed the overall weight of the drone. So the drone's going to have a gross weight limitation by the manufacturer. And you have to take into account how much the drone weighs ready to fly with a battery in it, plus whatever you're going to attach to it. That combination cannot exceed the gross weight established by the manufacturer. By the way, the FAA does not establish that, do they? The FAA does not have anything to do with the gross weight of the drone, other than they will enforce it based on what the manufacturer tells you is the gross weight. But the FAA will enforce it, but they don't define it. Here's another pretty straightforward idea that I really want you to pay attention to, and that is there will be probably only one question, as I recall. I've only run into one question at all about dropping objects, and it had to do with something where you're flying along and you decide to drop something over a ballpark filled with soccer people, or some question like that has to do with your legality in dropping things. You do not need a license to drop something from a drone. You don't need permission from anybody to drop something from a drone. All you need to do is make sure that it doesn't injure or damage people or property. And that's up to you, the pilot, your remote pilot in command. You have to decide whether dropping something from the drone will not endanger people or property. But you don't have to get permission. So there's going to be a question in that test, I bet you, that'll ask you if you need to have permission from someone to drop something from a drone. And the answer is no, you do not need permission from anybody. And then the caveat is, as long as you don't endanger people or property. So emergency procedures, this is something that, as the pilot in command, you'll probably be spending a lot of time going over before you ever allow someone to go ahead and fly the drone on your behalf, since you're going to be standing there being paid $50 an hour for being the remote pilot in command. You're the one that has to determine how to handle various emergencies that could come up. In which case, if there are any emergencies that have been identified by the manufacturer will tell you how to deal with those emergencies. With the little hub SAN, there aren't too many ways to deal with an emergency, because all of a sudden, if you think that the little drone is heading over towards a group of people, what is the only thing you could do with that drone? Drop it straight down or try to maneuver it away from those people. But the more advanced drones, by the way, are built in with software that essentially tells the drone to do certain things if there's an emergency. You can declare an emergency, you can punch an emergency button, and the drone will either hover in its spot, or it will come back towards you, or it will do something that the manufacturer has said, this is a safe way to handle emergencies. Can you violate anything in 107? Yes. If it's an emergency. And is anybody going to be standing right next to you asking you if it was an emergency? No, they're not. But if something happens, let's say you were deviating in an emergency from a commercial airliner that was landing at FAT, and you wound up getting over in the path of a small aircraft landing at FAT, and caused that aircraft to deviate. You know the FAA is going to find out about it. You just have to file a report with the FAA explaining the emergency if the FAA requests it. It's not automatic. If you deviate from any Part 107 in an emergency, it is not going to be required that you automatically file a report with the FAA. Only if you are being asked by the FAA to give a report on why you deviated from Part 107, you declared an emergency, you did it for the following reasons, that's all they want to know. Lost link. Does everybody know what a link is? It's the connection, it's the wireless connection between you and the drone. And there's something called an uplink and a downlink. The downlink is the information the drone is sending back, like a picture in the video camera. Pardon? I say it again, Andrew, a little slower. Can the drone get what? Hacked? I don't know. Never hacked anybody. Have you ever hacked anybody? No, I haven't either, so I don't know whether they can or not. But I'll bet you that if people are sophisticated enough to hack almost any website in the world, I suppose they'd be sophisticated enough to hack a drone web, right? One of the problems, by the way, with a drone is the fact that the frequencies that operate on a drone are often the same frequencies that are here in Reedy College or anywhere where there's a lot of wireless signals being given back and forth. It's the same cluster of frequencies. Now, later on, the manufacturers have started trying to segregate the frequencies of uplink and downlink so that it doesn't conflict with current wireless traffic. But if you have a phone in your pocket and you're getting wireless signals, it could very well be interfering with your controlling of the drone. So be careful of that. I point that out in here. You'll see that in a minute. So when a lost link, the manufacturer usually is going to say, here's what you do in a lost link. And it'll give you a set of instructions. It may very well be that the instructions are simply to engage the emergency button or press the asterisk button or something. Something might be just as simple because the manufacturer has already built into the drone and the software something that can handle an emergency or something that can handle the fact that you somehow or other have lost a link. It could be that you've lost one link, an uplink, and you still have a downlink. That is, you may still be able to see the video picture on your controlling box, but it may be that the drone is not responding to your input, which is uplinks. So you're not getting any uplink, but you are getting downlinks. And in this particular case, you really need to know the difference because if something's occurring where you're still getting the video picture, if the drone is still in the air, you're getting a video picture, but the drone is not responding to your inputs at all, it could very well mean that the uplink signal is not working. And in that particular case, the manufacturer may say, in the event of an uplink failure, do this. In the event of a downlink failure, do that. And in an event at a total loss of link, do the following. So you have to know the difference between the two. Uplink means that the drone is controlling what you tell it to do. Downlink is whatever is being sent from the drone down to you. And that particular issue is going to be, the visual part of that is the fact that it's sending a video picture. Matthew? The manufacturer what? The way to do what now with an uplink? The way to solve any one of those is to look in the manufacturer's book and see what the manufacturer says about how to handle either one of the three, right? The uplink fails, the downlink fails, or both fail. And the manufacturers, in some cases, the manufacturer might have built in a software which says if either one of the links fail, go directly back to the controls box. So if all of a sudden one of the links fails and you see the drone coming back to you, it may mean that the manufacturer has put in there an emergency software that says, in the event of a lost link, come right back to the control box. Andrew? What about it? The uplink is where you make controls with the controller, and that goes up to the drone. That's an uplink. Just remember, from the grass, standing in the grass to the drone up in the air is an uplink. A downlink is whatever the drone is sending you back. So if you send a control that says descend, then the drone is going to start descending. But more importantly is, if you have a control and you have a picture on your control box, and it's of the video camera, and the video camera is still sending you information, that means that the downlink is still working. Okay, so the manufacturer is going to describe that. More than the hub SAN, the hub SAN has hardly any information in it whatsoever. It's mainly just for people who want to play around and don't want to get real serious about drones. But if you're going to pay $2,000 or $3,000 for a drone, as Dale already probably knows, a lot of information will be contained within the drone information itself. I'm not sure whether you will know all of the preset procedures that have been put into that unit. The manufacturer may have some in there that they just didn't talk about, but they've designed it in such a way that in a particular loss of link somehow, that the drone is expected to do something. And again, I don't know the answer to that, because I don't know how many different manufacturers there are out there, or what each manufacturer believes is the right way to solve a lost link. In some cases, so I've understood, a drone might just remain stationary whenever the link was lost. It'll remain hovering there, hoping that the link will be reestablished. That's one possibility. The other possibility is that it could return directly to you if there was a lost link. Or it would auto-land after a certain length of time. If, for example, the uplink was lost, you were giving the drone no corrections whatsoever, or no directions whatsoever, and after a period of, say, 5 or 10 minutes, it was getting no signals from you at all, it would automatically land itself. I don't know what manufacturers specify. All I know is that you need to be aware, so that if you decide that you're going to go out to the farmer's field and you're going to oversee the operations, let's say the farmer's son is doing the controlling of the box, and you want to make sure, and you've been hired to oversee the operation, it would be worth your while to know well in advance what kind of drone is it, and get online, and you can download the user's manual. You can download any kind of manual you want from any manufacturer, so that you can prepare yourself in the event that anything happens when you get out there to the field. And it's going to, remember, if you're being hired to go out there, it's your responsibility to know what's likely to occur. Also, it turns out that a lost link is not considered an emergency. The FAA does not consider a lost link an emergency. And my understanding is the rationale is largely because the manufacturers can build in software to the extent that it can manage a lost link without endangering anything at that point in time. I think the most important thing probably would be not to auto-land it, but would be to return back to you. If anything was lost in the process, that the drone would come back to the originating station. So remember, as a member, or as the primary person in this operation as pilot in command, it's your responsibility to have some sort of contingency plan with the other crew members in the event these links are lost. But that's something you would do anyway. Remember, one of the questions on the exam, one of the exams we already had was, as the pilot in command, are you responsible for letting everybody in the crew know what's going on? And the answer is yes, you're responsible. And so if you understand already in advance, because you read all of the manuals, and most people don't, but you read the manuals, and before you ever got out to the field, that you were aware of what this drone was going to likely do, you need to be telling the crew members that you're out there, and you tell them what you expect is going to happen if a link was lost. Okay, so loss of GPS. I think most drones probably today have a GPS, a very sophisticated GPS built on board, especially for autonomous operation. You remember autonomous operation? How many crew members do you need for autonomous operation? 1. Correct. Good. You remembered. See how easy it's going to be when you finally get to the final exam? You have all these things that you remember. Every time I ask the question now, everybody remembers these answers. So it's going to be interesting to see how well you do. I'm looking forward to having everybody at least do 85 to 90 consistently, and that means that you'll all pass and get your remote pilot license. Now, every once in a while, there are NOTAMs for the aviation industry that specify that there are going to be degraded signals from GPS. You know that the Defense Department, at their whim, at their discretion, they can turn on and turn off errors in the GPS system. You all know that, right? Okay, well now you know it. They have control over the accuracy of the GPS signals. Now what's interesting is that over time, so many people have begun to use the GPS signals, especially in aviation, where we're getting rid of the VORs and we're establishing GPS approaches into airports under instrument conditions, that it continues to add more and more pressure to the Defense Department not to fool around with the accuracy of GPS. But if they want to, they can instead of the accuracy right now being maybe 10 feet, right, plus or minus 10 feet, they can make it a mile, they can make it 10 miles, they can make it 30 miles, they can make it whatever they want to. And it's very easy to do from the ground. They throw a couple of switches and right away now your GPS signal is telling you you're 20 miles away from where you really are. So one of the things you need to do about a possible GPS loss of signal is to develop some kind of plan. What's going to happen if you lose the GPS signal? If you told the drone to go down to the far end of the orchard so you could see what the video camera shows as far as the trees are concerned and whether they're getting any water, if at that point in time you lost the GPS signal, one of the things I know you can do is that you can input a code into the controller box and that drone will return to you. But these are the kind of plans that you as a pilot in command need to know. You need to be able to know in advance what happens, what are you going to do if the GPS signal is lost. And by the way, there's a really good checklist that I will give you at the conclusion of the course that will prepare you. It's about a 30-item checklist that will prepare you for going out and being hired by people to do drone work. And it's all the things that you as a pilot in command need to review or know in advance before you go out there and start earning your money. A flyaway, as you can probably imagine, is nothing more than the drone just getting away from you for no apparent reason. As the book points out, it's usually caused by loss of a link. And that probably would be what, the uplink or the downlink? The uplink, correct. Because you're the one that's sending the uplinks, and if it loses control and starts flying away, it means that it has lost the uplink from you. And the other possibility for flyaways is that all of a sudden the GPS or the drone becomes unpredictable. It's doing things that have no apparent reason from your point of view or from the point of view of whoever you've assigned to do the controlling of the drone. Now, how often are these things likely to happen? Probably not very often, huh? Especially if the drone is new, it hasn't been bashed up, it hasn't been kept in bad weather, it hasn't been stored in some place that's damp, it hasn't gotten full of dirt. It's been kept fairly nice in its operation. most of the things we're talking about here are probably not going to happen, maybe in your lifetime. The problem is you need to be prepared for them if they do. And that's why you get paid money to go out and become the pilot in command. In the case of a drone flyaway, it may also be because you've expected it to go somewhere and do something, and it's not doing it. So these preset procedures, which could be auto land, which could be return to base, which could be anything that you thought was preset into the drone, if those are not working, then you're in a situation where you need to deal with it. And this is one of the things that I was surprised at, and that is the original two sets of frequencies that we use for up and down links are the sets of frequencies that operate between wireless telephones and wireless computers. So it wouldn't surprise me if trying to fly these hub sands, if all of a sudden you found yourself with the hub sand not responding, and now it's going to go over and land on a roof or in a tree. It could be the wind, but it could also be the fact that it was being interfered with by maybe somebody's phone in their pocket that was turned on, or enough wireless signals from building to building on the campus where it interfered with the drone operations. Be aware that if, for some reason, it's not responding momentarily or it's responding erratically, it could very well be that you need to search for something that's creating wireless signals. Now, if you're operating, for example, at Fresno Air Terminal, and you lose the control for whatever reason, you need to notify ATC, pick up your cell phone and call the tower and say, you know, I've been operating down here with your permission, but now I've lost my drone, and I think it's in the following area, or I think it's in the vicinity. In that particular case, you want to make sure you notify them. But if you lose it over at Reedley College, what about that? I mean, Reedley Municipal. Do you have to notify the ATC? I'm sorry, what? If somebody's mumbling at their desk instead of speaking directly to me, I'd appreciate it if they'd talk clearly towards me. Jesus, was that you? Oh, okay. Just wondering. Does anybody know the answer to that? Do you have to notify ATC if you have a flyaway over Reedley Municipal Airport? The answer is no. Because you are not in touch with air traffic control. The only time you're in touch with air traffic control is if you are flying a drone in an area that is controlled by a tower, right? In that particular case, it would be only FAT around here. So you could fly a drone at Fresno Chandler, you could fly it at Sierra Sky Park, at Reedley, at Visalia, any of those airports that are not directly under the control of ATC. Then there's another category flight called flight termination. And that's a situation where, for whatever reason, you decide or the manufacturer has software built in that will terminate the flight. Well, flight termination. Remember now, you know, it might be that you're thinking to yourself, well, you know, these questions are a bunch of baloney. I'm not going to worry too much about them. But, you know, if one happens to pop up on your test and it's the difference between you getting your license and not getting your license, you would certainly like to have remembered the definition of flight termination. There were a couple of times out there in the football field we would have appreciated flight termination. In fact, I don't know if we've ever recovered that drone that's in the tree. Yeah, it could be. Okay, so if you're thinking about flight termination, it's your responsibility as pilot in command to review all the possibilities that you can before you intentionally ground a drone. And I think part of that comes from the fact that if the drone is fairly far away, or it's being autonomously operated, or you have permission to exceed the 3-mile or the 300-mile limit where you can't see it any longer, then flight termination might be down on top of people, and you don't know that because it's too far away. And so the rules guarding operations, where the questions are going to be about 30% or 33% of the whole test, flight termination is going to be probably one of those questions, and the answer is only if you determine a need to avoid a pending unsafe operation. Only if you determine, as pilot in command, that you believe that that drone is going to cause an unsafe operation, whether it has to do with people or property or aircraft in the air, then you need to terminate the flight. And that means that you have to think about weather, obstacles, persons, areas, or other aviation-related activities. These have to be things that you think about. And if you believe that somehow or other you're compromising safety, and there is no other way to get the drone away from that unsafe operation, then you flight terminate it. But if there are other ways, that is, if just bringing the drone back to you in the base station gets it out of that unsafe condition, then there was no reason to do a flight termination. If, for example, you have a problem where the battery gives out and you're over altitude, one of the things you're going to have to consider is being able to land, have the drone go in such a way that it can land in an auto rotation. Everybody understand what an auto rotation is? Okay, well, consider the gyroplane. Remember the gyroplane where it had a propeller in front that pulled it off the ground? Then they could shut off the propeller over the airport, and by the weight of the aircraft coming down, turned the blades. And by turning the blades, it created lift. So it didn't fall at the rate of increase in gravity. Anybody remember what the increase in the rate of gravity is? The speed of gravity pulling you down. Do you remember how fast a body accelerates? No, I'm talking about the numbers themselves. Is anything like 32 feet per second? Is that not familiar to you? Which means that every second, the speed of falling to the ground increases by 32 feet per second. So in the first second, it's falling at a rate of 32 feet per second. The second second, it's falling at a rate of 64 feet per second. Right? And it keeps doing that. That's the rate of gravity. Gravity pulls you down at the rate of 32 feet per second. Okay, here we go some more. Right? UAS fire. What do you think would cause a fire before anything else? Pardon? What about it was a beautifully perfect day, no lightning, no nothing. What could possibly go wrong in terms of fire with that drone? The battery. Because it's probably going to be some sort of a lithium derivative battery, in which case lithiums have been known to go out of control, start a fire, or explode. Andrew. If what now? Well, if they get all inflated, I'm not sure that how much they get inflated. I think they'd either explode or they'd get on fire, right? I think if the interior cells of a lithium battery start going out of control, I forget what the word is, some kind of word that says it get out of control, then it's a matter of either it's going to immediately catch fire or it's going to explode. So batteries on board are always a potential source of fire. And that's the only really potential source of fire that I can imagine. You're not supposed to be out flying on a day when there are thunderstorms and lightning in the distance, because lightning can come out of a cloud 20 miles away and still hit you. And if you don't believe that, get on YouTube. There are plenty of videos that show people miles away from thunderstorms that have been struck by lightning, that came out of the cloud that was 20 miles away. So just keep in mind that the main factor in fires on board a small drone, or even any kind of size drone, would be the battery. That would be the principal problem. So, as the pilot in command, it's up to you to make sure you understand what that battery looks like. Is it new? Is it used? Has it been physically damaged? Is there a crack in the case somewhere? Have the terminals been corroded in some way? Anything looking at that battery. So when you go out to the farmer's field and the farmer's son or daughter are standing there with their drone that's been operating surreptitiously for a while, you want to make sure that you pull that battery out of that drone and look at it carefully. That's your responsibility. That's what they're paying you for. And you want to make sure you look at it really carefully. Any nicks, scratches, dents, anything that seems out of the way that might have physically damaged the battery, it's your responsibility. And with them pulling the batteries out of the drone and storing them, you want to make sure that your customers, the people who are relying on you as pilot in command, make sure that they store the batteries in such a way that they don't get damaged or that the terminals do not come in contact with metal. Okay, we're going to stop here at accident reporting. That accident reporting, by the way, what are the two things that are required to report an accident? Two things where you need to report an accident. Anybody remember that? Okay, injury where consciousness is lost, usually referred to as serious injury, and damage in excess of $500. So we'll include accident reporting, and we'll start the next time. We'll start at the next item on this lecture. Now, come on, Nico. If your little drone went by and cut off somebody's ear, you wouldn't report it? All right, I'm not giving you anybody, I'm giving nobody in here a drone license because you all are going to cut corners and you're not going to report when you're supposed to report. Okay, go home and examine your moral compass. Now, some of you need no, nobody, I guess, huh? Okay. Yeah.
Would you like for me to show up to class real quick and then...
Pardon?
Would you like for me to show up to class first and then leave, or do I just go straight to the appointment?
To do what now?
For my dentist appointment on Wednesday, tomorrow.
On your what?
My dentist appointment tomorrow. Do you want me to show up to class and then go, or just read the note on Thursday?
You're talking about tomorrow?
Yes.
But you can give me something when you come into class tomorrow?
No.
You're not going to be at class at all tomorrow?
No, I can show up if you need me to, but I need to go because it's 1:30. It's over there next to Dollar Tree. The family dental.
Are you from Reedley?
Yes.
Oh. Well, you need to bring me something. I need a piece of paper that says that you've been excused for a certain period of time from class. Okay?
Bring it on Thursday.
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine. All right, Andrew, you take care.